Hello, my name is Evelyn Gomez, and today my group and I will be talking about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. I definitely think that this hypothesis is something that's pretty fascinating with what we were able to find out. It's pretty much all about how the language we speak influences how we think, how we see the world, and even how we experience life. So, the way that my group and I are going to do it is we're going to start off by breaking down the basics of the theory, what it is and why it matters. Then we're going to dive into some research that we were able to conduct and put together that explores this idea further. After that, we will share some insights, pretty cool insights, from an interview that we were able to conduct so that we can give you more of a personal perspective of this topic. And finally, we'll talk about how the theory connects to our lives in a day-to-day personal experience. So let's kick it off by explaining what the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is all about. The first thing is, let's start with the basics. What is the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis? Well, at its core, it's the idea that the language we speak, doesn't just help us communicate, but it actually shapes how we think and see the world. This hypothesis was created by two men. The first one is Edward Sapir, and the second one is Benjamin Lee Whorf. And it's one of those concepts that really makes you rethink about how much power language really has. This theory is broken down into two main parts. The first one is linguistic determinism, and the second one is linguistic relativity. So let's go back to the first one, linguistic determinism. This is more of a stronger version, kind of extreme version that not so many people seem to agree with. What it says is, it says that language determines how you think. So, if a language doesn't know or have a word for something, people who speak that language wouldn't even be able to think about that concept. Let me give you an example. If a culture didn't have a word for freedom, would they even understand what being free means? Now, like I said, most experts don't fully agree with this part because thought isn't that limited by language. But it definitely is still a cool starting. Now, let's go into the second part of this theory, which is the linguistic relativity. This is more of a softer, more realistic version of and it's typically what most people agree with. What it says is, it says that language influences how we think, but it doesn't really control us. Think of it like wearing tinted glasses. Your language doesn't necessarily stop you from seeing everything, but it changes what stands out and how you interpret what you currently see. So let me give you some further examples. First, there's this really famous one when it comes to different languages and how we describe colors. So here in English, in English, right, when we're speaking colors in English, when you think of the color blue, we pretty much only have that one word, whether it's baby blue, light blue. It's typically always just blue. But in Russian, they actually have two separate words. They have голубой for light blue, and they have синий for dark blue. So studies have found that Russian speakers can actually distinguish shades of blue faster than English speakers, which shows how their language shapes their perception of colors. It's kind of like their brains are wired differently just because of the words that they currently use. Now, another example, and I think this one is kind of pretty wild because I never really thought about it, nor did I know about what I learned. It's in English, we'll talk about the word time as if it's something that moves in a straight line, right? Parallel, like a timeline, just straightforward. We'll say things like looking forward to the future or the past is behind us. But In some Aboriginal languages, time is connected to land. So rather than them saying the past is behind us or looking forward to the future, they say things like the future is downhill and the past is uphill, depending on their physical surroundings, which is a completely different way of thinking about something as basic as time. Now, what's really cool about this theory is the question it forces us to ask. Does language just reflect the way we see the world, or does it actually create the way we see the world? In other words, do our thoughts shape our words, or do our words shape our thoughts? Our textbook connects this to interpersonal communications, and it definitely makes sense on why and how. If language shapes how we think, then it obviously impacts how we talk to other people. For example, this is a big one because I am bilingual and I do actually find myself doing this, and I never really understood why. In languages like Spanish, we have built-in ways to show respect or formality. Like when you meet someone new or when you're speaking to an elder, you're referring them to usted. Now, when you are talking to someone that's about your age, around your age, or someone who you've established a relationship and is not an elder, you refer to them as tu, which is a little more personal. That tiny word can definitely completely change a tone of conversation and the respect that you're giving the next individual. But in English, we don't really have that. We don't have the same formal or informal distinction. So our conversations definitely tend to be a little more casual by default. So the more I think about this, the more I realize that language isn't just something we use. It is something that shapes us, whether we're aware of it or not. It's kind of like an invisible force that affects how we see the world and how we interact with it. And that is actually pretty fascinating when you think about it. So now that you know what the hypothesis is about, what theories it's broken down on, and you were able to get some kind of examples on it, we're going to go ahead and dive in straight into the research and what we were able to go ahead and gather.
Hello everyone, my name is Abraham Gonzalez, and for my group project I decided to do the research aspect of it. And to dig a little deeper into this, we looked at some recent articles, and here's a little bit about what we found. So starters, color perception can play a big role in aspects of communication when it comes to something such as artwork or fashion, stuff like that, something along those lines. And there's been a lot of work done with languages, and more color terms seem to help with making finer distinctions between these, again, like colors, clothes, paintings, stuff like that. And for example, people in Namibia who speak a language with fewer color terms, they tend to group colors differently than English speakers. And this is seen more of, how we have violet, for example, we have violet, turquoise, whatever. For them, it seems that, from the research, it seems that they just focus on red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. They don't seem to focus more on, the aspects of turquoise, lavender, anything like that. It's just, is it purple? Is it green? Is it blue? Is it purple? So yeah, that was something we noticed that can definitely affect your communications. If let's say for example, this is a gray shirt, but it looks black or something like that. It'll definitely be seen as like a little bit confusing when you're speaking to someone and they're saying, oh, that this chair is blue, but it's more turquoise or something like that. So yeah, the second part is time perception. People who speak Mandarin, they seem to see as time as more of a vertical term, something like up, down. Well, English speakers seem to more focus on something horizontal. For example, I went to the store yesterday, that's back, or I am going to the store next week, that's forward. So that's another example of the different time perceptions. And yeah, the third one is the bilingual identity. Bilingual people often say that they feel like a different version of themselves depending on the language they are speaking. For example, someone that's speaking Spanish might feel more focused on, the Hispanic culture, Spanish speaking cultures, but once they switch to English speaking, they might focus again on more, you know, uh, North American uh, traditions and stuff like that. And this plays a big role in your culture. For example, someone from Russia who's Russian American or whatever, they might see it as the one day they're speaking Russian in Russia, and then next they come back to America, and they're more focused on American terms with things such as saying but if, just stuff like that. It's more English speaking terms that you might not hear a lot in Russia. For the fourth point, we have gendered language. Languages like Spanish or German have a lot of feminine or masculine sounding words. For example, for Mexico, Spanish speaking, they see a bridge as more sturdy, masculine, and stuff like that. But people in Germany seem to have more focused on bridges. Bridges as feminine and beautiful. So they'll see it as describe a bridge, something along those lines, as more feminine, for example. And the fifth step is going to be our language and problem solving. Something simple as programming languages can influence thought. A study found that the structure of coding languages shapes how developers approach problems. So the idea of language shaping thought isn't just limited to natural languages. This can be seen in computer languages, programming such as Python, C++, anything like that. So it's not verbally. It could even be something as simple as a computer, or not as simple, but it's something as a computer. And the big takeaway here is that language definitely influences thought. It doesn't completely control it, but it acts as the filter that shapes how we experience the world. Alright, guys, continuing on what we were discussing. Another aspect that we've seen that was a common is that country of origin also plays a big role in how you communicate, because in places such as Australia, they don't use left, right, or forward, backwards. They more focus on northeast. The person is northeast, stuff like that, or they're southwest. They don't say behind you to the left. They say northeast, or they say west of you. They say stuff like that. And obviously it's more focused on accurate direction per se, instead of saying left. That's more general. If you say northwest, you'll know where to look, and you're not confused on, is it all the way over here. There's just more accurate of where they're trying to point at. And another important thing is emotional vocabulary. So places, again, bringing back to Germany, they have words for stuff. I don't the exact words, but they do have words that are very specific to a specific feeling or emotion. There's a word that means the pleasure you get out of someone else's misfortune, their bad luck, they went through something bad. They have a word for getting pleasure out of that. And another one is in the Philippines, the Filipino, they have a word for basically describing a satisfaction, basically, of squeezing something's cute, and just getting like a satisfactory feeling of squeezing something cute. And another thing is that agency of language. So in English speaking, we say something like, I broke the vase. But in Spanish, once you say a word and like correctly translate it, basically how it sounds from Spanish to English, it'll sound like the vase broke itself. So this is obviously going to be confusing to just someone who might be learning the language, and it sounds very foreign to them, where they're saying the vase broke itself. That sounds kind of weird, but when you actually focus on the language itself, you'll see that it says he broke the vase. So to summarize everything I've discussed right now, through our research, we found that language isn't really something we use to communicate. It shapes how we experience the world as well. It doesn't just go as far as a person A speaking, person B speaking. It shapes how we see the world in certain aspects, from color, shape, time, emotions, everything like that can play a role in how you see the world. And depending on your language, culture, background, country, it'll say, oh, this is what you've experienced for 20 years. You go to Russia, you're going to experience something completely new, and it's going to throw you off. And the most interesting part for me is that inside your own language, you don't see any of this. It's just natural. It flows. You don't hear saying specific words sounding weird to you. But once you start speaking Spanish, start speaking Russian, you'll start to notice certain patterns that you never noticed in your own language. And yeah, I think it's very interesting that you just you grow up 20 years speaking this language, speaking this way, and it'll never sound weird to you. It'll just flow. And yeah, so thank you guys very much for listening, and I hope you have a good
Hello everyone, my name is Natalie, and for the part of the project I am doing the interview. So I'll be examining the fascinating theory known as Sapir's Whorf's hypothesis today. It excites me since it shows how our language could affect our ideas and impressions. So this theory suggests that language provides a lens through which we view our surroundings, in addition to a means of communication. So for my interview, I chose my very good friend Jasmine, who I've known for many years. And she's a friend of mine that knows several languages. And I wanted to get her viewpoints in order to investigate this hypothesis more. So one of the questions that I had asked her was, do you believe the language you speak influences your perspective on the world? And if you can provide a simple example. So she had stated she has more awareness of emotional and family ties when speaking Spanish. The vocabulary often emphasizes a feeling of warmth and connection shown by the use of terms like abuelita, which means grandmother. This language shows the importance of family ties and shapes her views and gratitude of them. This illustration demonstrates how our language use could affect our emotions and interpersonal connection. The theory is that our chosen language might affect our view of our relationships and connections, therefore impacting how we take care of our social interactions. So Spanish is a language that fosters a strong feeling of community and belonging in societies where it is spoken, therefore strongly impacting people's perspectives of their surroundings. So another question I had asked Jasmine was, in another language, have you ever come across a new word that changed your perspective on something? So Jasmine's a bit new to the Spanish language, and she came across a word. She said she came to value mingling and interacting with others during meals after learning the Spanish word sombresa, which describes the time spent talking at the table following a meal. There is no straight English word for this idea, which shows how meals are seen differently depending on the culture. Sombresa highlights in Spanish-speaking societies the importance of community and communication. It implies that language may capture cultural practices and ideals, therefore guiding our priorities for social context. The third question I had asked Jasmine was, do you feel that speaking more than one language gives you a different perspective on things? So a little background on her. She believes that learning various languages gives her many point of views. She was in the military, in the Marines. She did her 4-year terms.
So in her military experience in Japan, since she was stationed in Japan, she learned a bit of Japanese. It provided her a bit of a deep understanding of the need of formality and respect in communication. The way the Japanese language uses, what's that word called? Honorifics. Yeah, the way they use honorifics and the different degrees of politeness highlights the cultural value on authority and respect. Knowing many languages help us to be more mentally flexible, which increases our capacity, oh my God. I'm sorry, which increases our capability of understanding people and valuing many points of views. So being able to think in several different languages enables us to comfortably and insightfully navigate several cultural environments. So moving on, the next question I had asked Jasmine was, in what ways do you believe language and culture influence our thinking? So Jasmine saw how often language matches the value of society. Japanese society definitely reflects the importance of respect in its language. So the relationship between language and culture stresses that language functions as a mirror of cultural identity rather than only as a means of communication. So understanding the cultural contexts of a language influences our worldview. So knowing these elements will help us to develop empathy and improve our capacity for communicating across cultures, since we become more sensitive to the differences included in language. So it inspires us to value the diversity of various languages and recognize that acquiring a new one could provide fresh perspectives on our surroundings. When we consider Jasmine's experiences, it is obvious how the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis suggests that language changes our perception. I'm sorry, I meant to say perception. So yeah, it changes our perception and how we see things. So Jasmine's encounters highlight the complex ways that culture and language interact to influence our perspective. This theory was introduced by Edward Sapir and Benjamin Lee Whorf in the early 20th century. So the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis argues that a language structure can affect how people use it, how people using it view and think about our surroundings. So in conclusion, understanding the connection between mind and language has a major effects on effective communication, acquiring languages, and sharing our cultures. It encourages us to value diversity of languages and cultures, therefore improving our abilities to interact and work together in a world becoming interconnected. So accepting the beauty of many languages allows us to establish empathy and understanding among many civilizations, therefore strengthening our connection with one another on a deeper level, and so fostering a more united world. And so thank you for listening to my audio.
Hi, my name is Marlena Wheeler, and I'm doing the application part of our project on Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. Learning about Sapir-Whorf hypothesis has been an incredible enlightening experience for me. Even though I'm bilingual, English has always been a default language. I never considered how languages can influence my thoughts and perceptions. However, diving into the topic had made me realize the extent of linguistic limitations and the perspectives of them. For instance, I began contemplating on significant specific words in experiencing emotions or describing experiences. English is a remarkable language. However, it lacks certain concepts or feelings. I've heard other languages possesses words that precisely capture emotions or situations that in English really doesn't capture. Only if you were to describe it using a full-on sentence. For example, the German word Skufendoof embodies a pleasure derived from somebody else's misfortune. And then in English, if you need to describe that, you have to do an entire sentence to convey the concept. It's intriguing to ponder how to absence of single words for something might hinder my ability to recognize or fully comprehend that feeling. Furthermore, I've noticed how language shapes my understanding of time. We perceive time as a tangible entity using phrases like spending time or saving time. We even say time is money. Before, I didn't give too much to this concept, not too much thought. But now I realize influences may my approach to scheduling and prioritizing certain things in my life. I constantly feel that I need to be more productive, use my time wisely. This perspective makes me wonder if I perceive time differently. If I spoke a different language, that if it in any way it frames it differently, more relaxed or a more abstract manner. In English, we use different tenses to describe past, present, and future. This structure encourages a clear demonstration between time frames. Growing up with English, I became more accustomed thinking time as a linear and more comprehensive. Past actions are finished, present actions are ongoing, future is something reflecting on. The linearity of everyday speech and often shapes how I plan, reflect, and make decisions. For example, I might find it difficult to compromise events outside the clear division. When I think about planning, I automatically consider tense it belongs to. I will do this tomorrow. Or I did yesterday, rarely blurring the lines between them. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis truly captured me, particularly in impact to my relationships and communication. English, being relatively direct compared to other languages like Japanese or Korean, lacks the same level of formality or nuance. The way we speak in these languages depends on the person we are addressing. I wonder if the influences I formed connections with others, do I come off a little more blunt or straightforward without me realizing it? English has a wide range of words, colors, but also a specific variety with other languages. For instance, language like Russian has a distinct word for lighter and darker shades of blue. Light blue and dark blue are considered separate colors. These distinct has been shown to influence how speaks of Russian perceive distinguish between blue hues compared to English speaks. You may see them as variations of the same color. Reflecting on my experiences, I realize how difficult identifying subdued variations in these colors don't have a distinct name in English. While I can distinguish between certain shades, The lack of specific vocabulary may make it harder for me to appreciate the nuance between someone from a language with more color terms might recognize immediately. The Spare-Whorf hypothesis ignited a desire within me to learn other languages, either Chinese or even a Middle Eastern language. It's more broadened out here in the United States, so I feel like it would give me a more broader perspective and open up my mind a little bit more. I think not only for communication, but it also will broaden my perspective of the world. I believe it could be fostered greater open-mindedness and creativity, exposing me to the way I think and the way I speak. It's fascinating to consider how a simple word can alter how we process experiences or even perceive ourselves. Even though I'm bilingual, and there's a lot of words that you could change up in the Spanish language, I can certainly relate to Spare-Whorf's hypothesis in my daily life. It made me more aware of how language shapes my reality and how I interpret the world around me. Honestly, it has given me a profound appreciation for the profound influence for words. In conclusion, the Spare-Whorf hypothesis offers a fresh perspective on a power of language. It's not just about communication, it's about how we perceive and understand the world. This research we reviewed suggests that language doesn't fully control our thoughts, but it certainly shapes them subtly. Hearing firsthand from someone who experiences this daily made it even clearer how much language impacts our lives. Thank you for listening. We hope this provided you with a newfound appreciation for relationships between languages and thoughts.